Okay, let's explore something with that new or improved displacement noise filter. As you've seen here on the render noise tool. This noise tool, also known as the displacement noise, will create noise and displace it. And you have a bunch of parameters you can play with here. And you can even play it here, show it animated, so it keeps animating. Maybe you need it a little bit faster. And so you could easily create some moving patterns here for the surface of a star, the sun, the sunspots, some bumpiness to it, more detail or very little. And there's in fact additional layers of noise. There's the main layer that you see here, but there's an additional one which you could have do its own thing and at different sizes. So you have a combination of cloud layers, so to speak. You can combine them, showing the lesser, the darker, or multiply the two. Perhaps add a little bit of brightness there, gamma. So you have interesting patterns. One thing I want to do now is take this and make it a looping animation, maybe 200 frames long, just to have some sort of a background. Looping and tileable, seamless and tileable and looping. Okay, so I'm going to OK that. And of course, I need a placeholder. So maybe let's see, what's the dimensions right now here? Info 1800, and maybe that's bigger than what I need. So I'm going to go create a new image and make it something a little bit more standard, like 1280 by 768 or by 800, something like that. And we should then be able to create a placeholder. Let's say we want to create in the animation menu here, go create and say 200 or a few more. It's always good to have a few more. And that doesn't take too much memory, 600 megabytes, so that's good. It will have to fit in 2 gigabytes. So here we go. So we have an animation that's empty. Every frame is just blank. But now we can go to the render and noise tool and keep showing this animated. And so let's say we want to render it just like that. It remembers the settings you had last time. Unless you use this new X button up there, that will reset it. Right, if you want to go back to defaults. But let's say we want to keep that, or maybe tweak a little bit more for more displacement or larger, higher. I don't know, there's so many parameters to play with here. Okay, let's say we take this and animate. So click the animate button here, and that will apply it across each frame of this animation placeholder. And you see at the top here which frame it's working on, 150, 160, 170, we have 230 something. There, we are done. So we have, now we can play it. You can play it at different speed here. You can go faster if you want to see it play a little bit faster. So let's say we need to store this in case we want to get back to it and do something differently. So I'm going to go to the animation, store animation, and it's good to not keep it in memory because it's going to run out of memory soon enough. I'm going to keep it on disk. It's fast, it's the SSD drive, and that way we can now do a couple of things. One is to make it seamless. So that would be under the image menu, make seamless. And what that basically does is it overlaps the edge on the right side with the same on the left side by a certain percentage. So you can blend it over. And then the same thing, let's say we want exactly 20% here, or 22, because I'm lazy, I don't want to move my hand. And I'm going to go 22 on that as well. It could be a different number. But let's go OK that. So now each frame will be turned tileable, seamless. And that's one thing we wanted. And then the other thing is to add, to make it loopable so that the end of the sequence, maybe the last 20 or 30 frames, is blended into the beginning. And of course, the animation will be a little bit shorter, but we did give it more than we needed. We wanted 200 frames. We took 230 or something like that. So now we can easily sacrifice a few of these. Before we do that, let's just double check what we just got. So we have an animation that is now tileable, and seamlessly. So we could, for example, check that in the transform with the shift, and then if you grab the hand here, you cannot see a seam. Now, if you zoom out, you can see a pattern being repeated, but you don't see a cut or a seam or something like that, right? So that's the purpose of the make seamless. You can also see that in the transform filter. So here you need to tile it, but you can see indeed it is tileable. And you can also rotate it. You can scale it in and out. So now here you can see the repetition of the pattern because it's small enough, but you don't see a cut. And you can apply that transform to the entire frame sequence, the entire animation if you want to. I'm going to cancel that, go back. Let's say we store that one too, because we might need to get back to this. So store that. So now you have two stored animations. And of course you can minimize this if you want them out of your way. But it's good to have access to that really quickly, because all you do is you click here and that restores that entire animation right here. So now the next thing we want to do is perhaps improve a little bit on the contrast, maybe emboss it, maybe do some edge detection. I'll leave it to you here for exploring some of the convolution filters, sharpening, yada yada. So that's not the purpose right now. The only last thing we want to do is right click on this animation and say we want to make it loopable. And what that's going to do is going to take a certain number of frames at the end, right? Here's the total, here's the last frame, 233, but you say you want to take a few of them and end the animation here at frame 200, so the remaining one is going to be blended out into the beginning. And then that way we have a looping animation where you should not see too much of a transition going from one to the other. Except if it's a very short transition, you might notice it. Or if it is just a very different image, right? But here the noise is somewhat noisy enough that it's difficult to see where is that transition back to the beginning now. Usually I take more than 30 frames, right? Usually I give it a little bit more time to transition that way. But here you are. Now you have an animation that is seamless and loopable, and you could do a variety of things with that. First of all, let's go store it. One of the reasons to store it on disk too is that if the program were to crash, power outage or low on battery or just hit a bug or something, these are on disk and can be recovered, and they are in the temp folder. But the other reason, of course, is to use one as maybe a displacement map. So you can say here, let's use that animated swap as an animated swap image, and then whether it's the same animation or even a different animation, you can then use a filter, for example, to displace it, maybe with the pool displace, or I don't know, there's a couple of others. Let's try the pool, and then so that will do a little bit of a squirrely displacement here, and apply that. So that adds additional maybe marble textures that are animated, fancy stuff. Anyway, let's go back to this, and certainly at the end you don't just want to see this, you want to save it and use it somewhere else. So here we're going to the animation menu, and you will want to save it in a couple of ways. You will want to save it in the native DWA format in case you need to come back to it, so you can easily load it as a block. DWA file is a quick file to save and also to reopen, to reload. You can also save it as an AVI, and I recommend a lossless codec for that. We mention some of them often enough. So when you have an AVI, you want to make sure it's not a lossy codec, but a lossless, and fast enough and supporting the resolution you have, etc. And then there's also export media. There's a couple of formats. There's also animated GIF. Now this one is too big to really consider using it as an animated GIF. That would be something for small, short animations. But you can export to as media. You can export it to MP4, and you can also save it in a couple of versions of Windows Movie, WMV. And so that's certainly another option to consider, especially if you have another application like a video editor or something where you want to integrate that and it does support MP4 as an import. And there's lots of applications that do. This one actually doesn't. We can export to MP4, but we cannot yet currently import MP4. So that's why perhaps you'll want to also save it to other formats where you can do some more work with it if needed. Lossless codec or the DWA, which is lossless. One thing you can also see here is the target bitrate. I would always give it a little bit more, like 12 on this, and then save it. And here it's just like in my documents, my media. Of course, you'll want to give it the right file and location. After you save it, always be sure to play it back, especially if you save it to AVI or some other formats. You could also save it to image sequence. That's a very common thing to do. And always double check before you leave it here. Double check that it got saved and you can use it again. So for example, you can show it here quickly and it will open it in your default application. That's the application that's currently registered on your system to play, in this case, MP4. And so that could be Windows Media Player, it could be the new video player, it could be, there's so many video players out there. So whatever your application is assigned to play such a video file of that type, it should show it here, and then that way you can see that it is showing what it should. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.